Hey everyone, you got Wes Spencer here from FifthWall Solutions. Really excited to be with you, and thank you to all the folks at QuickPass and inviting us into the fantastic forum virtual. Let's dive into one of the hottest topics that's in the MSP space, bar none, cyber insurance. This is something that every MSP is dealing with, grappling with, and the cool thing is a lot of MSPs are seizing the bull by the horns and really doing a good job with this. So we're going to talk about that, how all of that works. So first of all, just a quick little peek at yours truly. I'm a cybersecurity guy by trade, was a co-founder at Perch Security, spent a year at ConnectWise as their vice president and external channel chief and security influencer. Also super active in LinkedIn, YouTube, all that stuff. So go check me out. I'd love to connect with you as well. And a super quick peek on who FifthWall is, because it's relative, right? Like who are we and why are we qualified to talk about this? So we are pretty much the biggest cyber insurance only distributor out there. So when you think about a classic distributor helping us match make solutions, we do the same thing on the insurance side. We work with about 43 carriers now. We have global access to the market. This says 600 MSPs, actually 700 MSPs that we work with, and really just helping solve cyber insurance. It's what we do. It's what we love. It's what we eat, breathe, and unfortunately what we sleep as well. So I'm going to skip by this little part and I'm going to talk a little bit about insurance as a whole. So one of the things that's really important when we look at insurance is there's differences between good and bad. And I think you should know that by now. We've all had those horror stories of like when things don't go well with this stuff and it can be really scary. And so, you know, when you look at a comprehensive cybersecurity insurance a policy, it comes with a lot of different things, a lot of the things that you see in here. We don't have time today to get into every single one of these, but just know today's modern breaches require modern solutions, and there's so much cost baked in that both MSPs and clients are typically not prepared for. It's not just, do I pay the ransom? It's things like regulation costs. How do I restore the data? Subpoenas, potentially depositions and lawsuits, lost business, fraud response, digital forensics. I mean, it really stacks up. It's pretty wild. And for MSPs in particular, tech E&O has become a really big issue. Technology errors and omissions. This is an additional coverage line that you as an MSP, you really need it. The reason you need it is because sometimes breaches happen that didn't happen from the client, that the client may have, that had nothing to do with them. Sometimes, you know, your tools get leveraged by bad guys. Those are really scary situations, but they do happen. And Tech E&O has additional coverage for that covers you for errors and omissions that may have downstream ramifications for your clients. So just wanted to cover that as well. It's pretty important. You know, in the old days of cyber insurance, it was like Oprah up in here, right? It was like, oh, you want insurance? You got it. You want insurance? You got it. You got it. You got it. Oh, you over here? I got you too, right? That's how it was. Basically, you had a business name, you had a real actual personal name, and you could fog a mirror, you were getting cyber insurance, right? Like it was super simple in 2017 and before. Like anybody was getting it. But that was the day before, that was like called the day of innocence, right? And if you look at the timeline, I'm not going to go through like every tiny little piece of this, but I want you to understand what's caused cyber insurance to be such a hot topic, why MSPs are talking about it constantly nonstop. You know, in those early days, it was super simple. Small businesses weren't being hit by anything. And so even though adoption was low, it wasn't expensive. And so the carriers were like, this is like stealing candy from babies, man. Like this is easy. So they were giving insurance out to everybody because you're like, you're a small business. What could you possibly have in terms of damages? So this is easy, you know, kind of give out a $1,000 policy. What's the maximum damage? $50,000. This will be easy. No big deal. And it worked well for them. But then fast forward to 2019 and all of a sudden everything shifts, right? We start seeing bad guys in mass go after MSPs and small business. And they learned that it wasn't just $10,000, $50,000, that small business could actually pay a whole lot more, all the way up to, you know, $250,000 on average today for just the cost of a ransom. And the all told cost of a breach, $1 million. I mean, that's wild. And so what happened is bad guys figured this out. The number of breaches started going up because the bad guys are like, look, I could spend all my time trying to go after Bank of America, or I could just go after small Main Street bank. And I could go after 100 Main Street banks and have a much higher success ratio. And that's what happened. So 2019, we start to see an escalation in the number of successful attacks against small business. The cost goes up. Ransomware hits on the scene like crazy. And then 2020 is like, hey, hold my cyber beer. Watch this. We have this pandemic, right? Pandemic comes in. Everybody shifts to work from home. Everyone's remoting in, and no one did it right as far as security. And so breaches just went uncontrollably high. So you fast forward to today, and what's happening is you look at the data here. Take a look. You see these news articles where we are now seeing systemic large events that are impacting everybody. We're seeing cyber attacks happen, and they hit the Wall Street Journal that CEOs read, and they're aware of this. They're concerned by this. And look at the data here. I don't have time to go through like every little piece of this, but I want you to focus on the left graph here first. So you see this hockey stick in blue growth. This is the cost of premiums. In other words, this is how insurance is getting more and more expensive. And this is tracked quarterly. So if you really want to get an annual percentage, count one and then go ahead 4 and then look at the other one. So like look at, for example, fourth quarter of 20 and then look at fourth quarter of 2021. You see how much higher that is? I mean, it's like over double. In other words, cyber insurance has gotten crazy expensive. And you know this because you've had conversations and your client's like, man, I paid $3,000 last year. Now they want $8,000. What's happening here? Well, insurance is getting really expensive to get. Why? Because breaches are going up, 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 up. And the success of those breaches are still astoundingly bad. And look at this middle graph. This is interesting too. You see this red line that's there? That's what's called loss ratios. If there's one thing that carriers care about, it's cyber loss ratios. This is for every dollar they bring in, how many cents go out the back door? Just to give you an idea of how bad, like right now, the number is about 63%. You see how it's hovered right there in that 63% area? That's really bad. In typical insurance lines like auto, home, whatever, a good loss ratio should be 15%, 15%. At no point has cyber ever been anywhere close to that. And in fact, all through 2019 and 2020, remember I was showing you how attacks rose? Look how that red line just blossomed and blew up into like unsustainably high ratios. Now it's come down a little bit, and I believe that's because primarily conflict in Ukraine has caused a reduction in the number of attacks. We're seeing more cyber warfare against Ukraine than we are against us. That's a whole topic for another day. That loss ratio will probably go back up again. And so this is why the market is upside down. The loss ratios have blown up. It's expensive to get insurance. And until we fix this problem, it's going to continue to be an issue. But here's the thing. We can't just walk away and say, well, it's too expensive. I don't need insurance. I can't afford it. No. Well, I'm going to show you why that's so important as we continue to move on. You know, another thing in insurance is that the carriers, and here's the deal, my friends, I'm pretty agnostic on the carriers. I'm not going to like hate on carriers. I'm not going to love on carriers. At FifthWall, we just line you up with the right carrier for you. We have access to, you name them, we know them. We work with almost all the carriers out there. So I'm agnostic. Right. And so one of the things we're seeing the carriers do is starting to put a line in the sand. Many of you have probably seen this. This happened last year. So Travelers is actually trying to get out of a claim they made for one of their clients. So what happened was, you see this word misrepresentation. What happened was the client told Travelers when they were going through their questionnaire, do you have MFA, multi-factor authentication? The client's like, yep, we got it. Well, come to find out in the aftermath of a breach, they did not have it. They misrepresented. That's a polite way of saying you lied. And so what Travelers is saying is, we're suing you. We're going to pull back those damages. Why should we be liable to pay out on a breach when you didn't have the right controls in place that you said you had? Makes sense to me, right? So you're seeing carriers draw lines in the sand. Another thing that's important is a lot of times people just don't know their policies. They don't know what's inside of them. And this is another example. This is a really scary one. This is a PC store, like a chain of them. They do like iPhone repairs and, that kind of stuff. And they had a business email compromise. The total damages were $600,000. They thought, we should be fine. No worries here. I mean, hey, look, we got, $1 million policy. We should be good, right? Well, Travelers, in this case, is Travelers once again, they came back and they said, nope, you only have 100,000. We're paying you back 100. And so now the PC store is left with $500,000 in damages that they couldn't recover. And so they sued Travelers, and they're like, Travelers, we have a $1 million policy. You only paid out 100,000. What gives? We should have the whole 600 returned to us. Within the first week, a judge looked at it and threw it out. And here's what he said. This is cut and dry, client. Travelers did nothing wrong. You clearly had $100,000, what's called a sublimit for social engineering damages. In other words, the max this policy was going to pay out was $100K, and you knew that. It wasn't like buried in terms. It was clearly disclosed, like front page clearly disclosed. They just never read their policy. They just said, oh, we have $1 million. We should be covered up to $1 million. We should be fine, right? Well, no. And so that's a huge, huge lesson learned. We're going to talk more about sublimits in a minute, but just want to show you some stuff around that. So right now we're in a hard market. What that means is when we're having lots of breaches and a lot of claims and the cost is going up, what happens? A lot of carriers are saying, this cyber insurance thing, I don't think we want to be in this anymore. I don't think we want to cover this. If you're an MSP listening to this, guess what? There are only like about 5 or 6 carriers that will even insure an MSP anymore. The second you say I'm an MSP, all these big well-known carriers like Hiscox and all these others are like, nope, we're not even going to cover MSPs. We're just done. This is a hard market right now. Until we solve this and we bring the number of breaches down and we get the cost under control, we're just in a really difficult market. And it doesn't help that cyber insurance is really knee-jerk, right? Like the shifting sands of all these questionnaires. You get these, used to be a 1-page questionnaire. Couple easy questions. Now it's like 10 pages and every client gets these big, long 10-page questionnaires. That's the challenge we're in with this hard market and a knee-jerk market is the carriers don't really know how to assess good security themselves. That's why they ask these crazy questions. That's why it seems like last year they asked these questions. This year they're asking these new questions. And I don't even know how to handle it and stay up to date. That's the challenge that we're in today. Cyber insurance is also really important. I want to zoom back into that question I had. Like, do I even need it anymore? Occasionally hear a client say something like that, like, this is so expensive. I don't need it. I don't want it. I'm not going to have it. There's no point in paying for it. Well, that's a pretty poor decision, right? When we look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, which most of you know now, cyber insurance is not really defined in it because the CSF was written in 2013 before cyber insurance was really a thing, but it does have a place. Response and recovery. If you followed me for any amount of time, I talk about this assume breach mentality. It's not a question of if a breach is going to happen. It's a question of when. And so the CSF has that built in. What do we do? How do we respond? And how do we recover? Cyber insurance is a critical piece in that stack. And I'm telling you, if you look into it, you'll be like, there's not a lot of other things that help me with response and recovery other than like data backups. So it's something you want to work on. And the cost of a breach, I mentioned all that at the very beginning. Breaches are really expensive today. The instant a breach happens and you realize you have it, first call you need to make, it really 2 calls, is to your cyber insurance carrier to let them know and to put them on notice so they can start working on it, and your legal counsel. This should not be just like your business lawyer that lives down the street from you. This needs to be somebody that understands cybersecurity. Usually the carrier will assign them for you. We call them breach coaches, and they jump in, they take action to reduce damages. They're going to bring in digital forensics. So they're going to understand how did this breach happen? When did it happen? What's the scope? Who is impacted? Then all these other things. Who do we notify and how? How do we deal with all these states that you have customers in different states that each have different notification laws? Every state in the country now have notification laws. How do you deal with that? Fraud response, lawsuits. So this is why a breach today easily gets to $1 million, easily. And so this clients don't understand that. If you talk to a client, you're like, what do you think a breach would cost you? They're like, oh, 25,000 maybe, How about $1 million? Clients are not ready for this. They're not prepared for it. And so you've got to go down this education journey to get them to understand why cyber insurance is a critical piece in the stack that they need to have. Now, I don't have time to go through all of this, but this is a comprehensive policy. And notice it has breakdowns of all these different areas, stuff that you probably never even considered before, not just paying the ransom, but credit monitoring, lost business. Like what happens if you were out for 4 days? Payroll, some policies will even cover payroll, not all, but some. Public relations costs. There's so many things that are in here, but you see those 3 at the bottom? Those are sublimits. Those are like where the carrier says, we're only going to pay out to this much. And the number one that you should pay attention to is the social engineering. In this case, this sample policy, this is $1 million policy, so it'll pay up to $1 million, but then it has breakouts of each of these items. But it's $1 million payout total in this example policy. But then they have a $250,000 sublimit here. So that's the big takeaway. Remember that computer store? You really want to know what your sublimits are. You need to have a conversation with your folks so you can understand, is my sublimit commensurate with a level of risk I have? Am I okay with $100,000, $250,000 sublimit? So you should have those conversations. Also, a lot of times clients think they have cyber under their policy and they don't. And I'm going to pick on agents for a minute. There's some great agents that are out there, but there's also a lot of agents that don't know cyber really well. And so a client comes in and they're like, I need cybersecurity. And they're like, great, we're just going to stick a warranty, is what it's called, under your general liability. Those things are junk. The max they would pay out is $100,000, but they're actually not built to pay out at all. They have way too many what we call exclusions. We won't pay for this. We won't pay for this. We won't pay for this. And so here's my way of thinking. If you talk to a client and you ask them, do you have a cyber insurance policy? It's really important you have one because of the cost of breaches. And they're like, I don't know. I think I do. Not sure. Chances are they don't. A full standalone comprehensive cybersecurity policy, they're going to know they have it because I had to go through this big questionnaire. It's a little bit more expensive. There's a lot more that goes into it. So just keep in mind, you got to know, you got to understand with your clients, because if you don't have this conversation with them, first thing they're going to do in the aftermath of a breach is point their finger at you and say, how did you let this happen? And why do we not have coverage for it? And why is this so expensive? I'm telling you, it's messy. So you really want to be ready for that. Now you can pause this and come back to it later, or just pull out your phone and just screenshot this, whatever. These are the 5 minimum controls you need to have to be eligible. So since we work with pretty much every carrier in the US, we know what all of them require. So we took all of the requirements and we boiled them down into 5 major, like the 5 buckets. And these are them. I don't have time to go through all 5. You can see them. You should probably know most of these by default. But these are the 5 you got to have in place. If you don't have these 5, you're going to run into some trouble because carriers are just not willing to take the risk. These are the critical 5. Now, I'm not saying it's the best 5. I'm not saying it's the only 5. But I am saying from the carrier's perspective, these are the 5 you have to have in place. So if you're an MSP listening to this today, you should be encouraged and excited about that, because I just gave you 5 different controls that you can now go cross-sell. At conferences, I say, how many of you have 5 different have solutions for all 5 of these? Every hand goes up in the room. Then I'm like, how many of you are selling all 5 of these to 100% of your clients? No hands go up in the room, right? You don't feel guilty about that. But my point is, you now have the ability to use cyber insurance as the carrot and the stick to drive better adoption. You know they need it. We know they need it. And this kind of forces the needle for them. So a couple last things in closing. There are certain things that you can say when it comes to cyber insurance and certain things you can't. And if you want to know the whole list, reach out to us at FifthWall. We have a really awesome, completely free, no strings attached education program for MSPs. It's called Cyber 101, and we'll teach you all of the intricate details here. But basically, just know this. Don't say, if you're not a licensed agent, don't say specifics. Don't tell a client, you need $1 million in coverage, or you should go with this policy instead of that one. Avoid that kind of language because it's illegal to say that. And you really want it, but it's okay for you to say you really need cyber insurance coverage. I'm going to mandate it even. We require all our clients to carry it. Totally fine to say that. Here are the big 5 controls that you need to have in place. Okay to say it. It's okay for you to sit down with a client and help them with a questionnaire. Don't do it for them. Sit down with them. It's even okay for you to bill the client to go through the questionnaire with them, but you can't fill it out yourself. Okay. So get in front of this. Make sure you read your policy. Make sure your clients read their policy. If you need help with a policy, another thing we do completely free at FifthWall, free policy reviews. Even if we didn't write it, we'll jump down, we'll sit down, we'll talk about the policy, give you everything you need to know. Understand the sublimits. And what we recommend is get involved 60 days in advance before a policy renews. So when you're talking to your clients and you're documenting things in your VCIO and your QBR processes, you should be documenting with the client when their policy is up for renewal. So 60 days in advance, you can get in front of it. Reach out to us at FifthWall. We'll help you. We'll go match make the client with the right policy. We'll hopefully save them a lot of money, and you'll be able to cross-sell a lot of controls. So really the future of cybersecurity, the way it's going, just a few things. We're going to see cyber insurance carriers push for more data. We're going to see them really say, look, we need to see more. With these questionnaires are not going to be enough. So expect them. You know how you put like little beacon in your car, you know, the drive safe and save thing. You're going to see carriers do the same thing of like, show us some of your data, your Microsoft Secure scores, things like that. So that's going to be the future. Expect that carriers are going to have to see more to be able to underwrite better. We talked about sublimits. Be very, very, very careful about those sublimits, especially social engineering. Educate your client around it. Make sure that they're aware. Make sure that you look at it as well. We don't have time to talk about acts of war, But acts of war clauses are becoming more and more important. We're starting to see kinetic warfare with cyber warfare attached together. You look at the conflict in Ukraine, we're seeing this. And so this is a big thing that the insurance circles are talking about is, do we pay out in an act of war? Do we not? What constitutes an act of war? That's a difficult discussion. It's not going to be solved today, but it's something that's definitely being talked about. If we can help you at FifthWall, like I said, we got all kinds of great stuff. FifthWallSolutions.com/MSP. We would love to help you, and we've got an incredible education pathway. No one else has anything like this. Would love for you to jump in. It's all no strings attached. I mean it. No minimums, no nothing. So we'd love to have you in it. Bring your sales team, your VCIOs, anybody that talks to clients. We'll teach you everything you need to know around this entire process. I'm going to skip by the key takeaways because I think we've covered them pretty well already. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for letting us speak today. Thank you especially to QuickPass and all the folks there for the fantastic forum virtual. It's been super fun. Wes Spencer here with you, FifthWallSolutions.com/MSP if we can help you out. Thank you so very much.